Hey everybody, in this box I have a security camera system from Onwote that we're going to be checking out in this video. Let's get started. Right off the bat, there's a couple of things I need to get out of the way. First of all, Onwote sent me this system to review for free, though no money has changed hands, and I'm under no obligation to say anything in particular or to share this video with them before I publish it. They have no editorial control whatsoever. Everything I'm going to say about this system will be completely my own opinion. And believe me, I have opinions about camera systems like this. You see, I already have one installed here at my house and at my office, and I hate them both. They're from different manufacturers, and they have various shortcomings that really bother me a lot. So I'm really hoping that this Onwote system is a little bit better than some of the other ones that I've already used. Finally, I will be leaving a link in the description to this system if you're interested in getting more details about it. And I think that's all the housekeeping I need to go over. So let's crack this box open and see what's inside. Here's everything that comes in the box. Starting over here, we've got the NVR or network video recorder and its accessories. We'll get into a lot more detail about that here in just a moment. Then we've got the Ethernet cabling. These are 60 feet long rolls and it is Cat 5e cabling. And the reason this comes with Ethernet cabling like this is because it is a PoE or Power over Ethernet system, which means each of the cameras does not need a second power cable run to it. All you need to do is run a single Ethernet cable to each camera location, and both the power and the data will be provided by the Ethernet cable. Now in my case, I already have Ethernet run to each of my camera locations because I already have a PoE system installed. So I'm not going to need to use any of these cables, but it's nice that they're included, and 60 feet is a pretty generous cable, though depending on your needs you might need longer runs. But you do get 8 60-foot cables. And that's because you get 8 cameras, and this is what the cameras look like here. There's a few accessories that come with each camera we'll go into more detail about as well. There's also your typical documentation, a warranty card, a user guide, that sort of thing. All right, let's take a closer look at the NVR. The NVR comes with a couple of accessories that I'd like to go over first, starting with the world's cheapest little mouse. I guess it's nice that they include one because you do have to have a mouse in order to do the initial system setup, but any USB mouse will work just fine. There's also a small Ethernet patch cable. You'll need this to connect the NVR to your home network. It also includes a power cable that's the same kind of style cable that you use for a traditional PC. And then there's also this little baggie that's got some foam feet that you can punch out and stick to the bottom, as well as some little screws that you can use to install an extra hard drive in order to increase the recording capacity of the unit. Moving to the rear of the system, you can see this is where most of the magic's going to happen. Let's go over each of these ports, starting with the PoE ports here. This is where you connect each of the cameras, and you can see it's got 2 banks of 8. Though I'm only going to be using the first 8 because I only have the 8 cameras, it's nice to know that I can add up to 8 more for a total of 16 because this system can record 16 simultaneous video feeds. It's great to have some expandability in the future if I want. This Ethernet port here is where I will connect it to my home network. These are audio in and out ports for two-way audio communication if your cameras support it. I'll note that the cameras that come with it do not support two-way audio, but you can add one in the future if you'd like. This is a VGA and an HDMI port you can use to connect an external monitor for both setting up the system initially as well as monitoring the system moving forward if you choose. Then there's also a USB port here on the back. That's where you plug in the power cable and then of course a power switch. This little orange port here is for integration with a home security system. Before I even power this on, I'm going to take this outer cover off and take a peek inside. I want to verify a couple of things, starting with the capacity of the hard drive and whether or not I can actually add a second drive. I believe I can, but let's find out. To do that, there are 2 black screws on either corner here at the front, and then there are 4 black screws across the back to remove. With all 6 of those screws removed, the lid simply slides back towards the rear of the unit and then can be lifted off. Now looking inside the unit, we don't have any big surprises. There's a simple basic power supply here, and then the motherboard that runs the whole system is down there. This is the hard drive that it ships with, and I'm pleased to see it's a Seagate Skyhawk drive. It's 4 terabytes in capacity, and Skyhawk drives are excellent. They are designed specifically for use in surveillance systems like this, and this drive should last a good long time. I'm glad to see they went with a high quality drive. In addition, in this area over here, we have room to add a second hard drive, and I happen to have another drive here. It's a 16 terabyte Iron Wolf drive This came out of one of my home storage solutions, and while I don't need it there anymore, I can repurpose it and put it into this case, which is going to increase my storage capacity substantially. I'm hoping I can get at least a month's worth of recordings on all of the cameras using these two drives together. Installing an extra drive is pretty straightforward. The connectors you'll need are already included in the system. They're taped down to the chassis. Just untape them from there and connect them to the drive. Then use the 4 included silver screws that come in a little plastic bag with the system to mount the drive to the chassis. Just make sure you don't pinch any of the wires underneath the drive as you install it. With the extra hard drive installed, the last thing I'm going to do is install these little foam feet that they've included to keep from scratching anything that I'm going to be putting this on. Alright, I'm ready to do the initial setup of this NVR. I've got it plugged into power and connected to this monitor here. I also plugged in the little mouse that came with it. Let's turn it on and see what we get. Alright, it's finally done booting up. That took longer than I expected, several minutes. I'll put the exact time down at the bottom of the screen, and it looks like I'm into a setup menu. I'll bring you in closer where you can see better. The initial setup is relatively straightforward. The default username is admin and the default password is 123456. Note that as soon as you log in for the first time, it prompts you to update the password to something more secure and also gives you the option to enter an unlock pattern if you'd like. Make sure you note both the new password and the pattern somewhere secure. You may also optionally add an email address at this point, but I skipped that part. The rest of the setup wizard is pretty straightforward, though since I had not yet connected it to my network, I had to manually set up the date and time, though once I do connect it, this will be kept in sync with a time server. It looks like next are the basic networking settings, both for setting up the connection to my home network as well as setting up the private network this is going to use for the cameras. It's nice to see I can change the subnet that I want on the cameras. That'll mean something to some of you, but if it doesn't, don't worry about it, just hit next. At this point, you can see the QR code that you'll need to connect to your mobile apps and remotely view your cameras, but you don't need to use that at this stage because it's both in the manual and it's available in another screen later on after everything is set up. So we're just going to hit OK to continue. One of the first things I like to do with a new system like this is to just sort of mess around in the menuing to get familiar with how to navigate around in it. This particular system is actually pretty easy to navigate with just a mouse, so you don't need a keyboard. First off, if you just move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen, a little menu appears where you can navigate around and get into like the main menu of the system, get into the playback menu, change up the view of the window configuration. It's got 16 here, but I can change that to 6 windows like that. Down over here, there's other options as well. Again, pretty convenient, and then when you move your mouse away, that menu just sort of disappears. Also though, if you just right click anywhere on the screen, you get another sort of a similar menu here where you can do a lot of the same things, like I can put it back to the 16 window setup, or I can go into the main menu itself. And in the main menu, there's one thing in particular that I recommend you do very first, and that is to pop into the storage and then go to hard disk and just verify that the disk is set up correctly. Now in my case, I do have those 2 disks because I added one, and I came here very first just to make sure that it recognized my disk and has it formatted and ready to use as recording. I recommend you go through all the rest of the menus. I won't take the time to do that here because everything I've found so far is actually really pretty self-explanatory. To get back out of this menu to the cameras, you can either hit the exit menu at the bottom, or again, you can just right click and it takes you right back out. All right, let's get our first camera plugged in and let's see how long it takes to connect. While we're waiting for that camera to come up, what I'm doing here is bench testing everything. As you've seen, I have not connected this to my network. I haven't even brought it in the house yet. I'm still out in the garage where I'm testing everything. And what I'm gonna do is I will plug in all 8 cameras here in the garage before I do anything else, because I wanna make sure that the cameras work. It would really be a pretty difficult thing to get up onto the top of a ladder, up on a 2nd story or wherever, you get a camera plugged in and then you can't figure out why it doesn't work. And it turns out maybe it's a defective camera. So I'm gonna test everything here to make sure it's all working. As you can see, that camera came up. Let's get a little better view of that. If we just double click, we can zoom in and we can see the picture a little better. Unfortunately, it's upside down. And that's because the way these cameras are set up, they are a ball mounted inside of a little frame, and you can rotate the ball around to change the image orientation. The other systems I've used in the past, though, have a way to change the orientation in software, so I went looking around in the menuing system to see if I could do that. I came into the camera setup, and then under camera, go to image, and under image, there is in fact an image rotation option. Unfortunately, the only option is normal. And I find this to be kind of annoying because if I go put up all my cameras and then come in to check out what the picture looks like, I may discover that some of them need to be rotated 180 degrees. It would really be nice if this was something that could be changed right in the software. As I've mentioned, that's something I've been able to change in other systems. But now that I know that, all I'm going to need to do before I go up onto the top of a ladder is, if a camera is going to be put up in an orientation where it needs to be rotated, simply rotate the ball of the camera around so that the little offset circle is at the bottom. That is going to always indicate the bottom of the image. All right, here I flipped this one over, and as you can see now, the image is right side up. And there's not too bad of a delay. You can see as I move my hand here in front of the camera and in front of what we're seeing, it's fairly responsive, pretty quick. I'm glad to see that. All right, now that I've had a chance to familiarize myself with the system and to test all 8 of the cameras before I'm up on a ladder, I don't want any surprises there, I'm now confident that this system is ready to fully install permanently in my home. But before I do that, let's go over the cameras themselves, some of their physical characteristics, how you go about mounting them, and what comes in the box. Now, inside the box with each camera, there are a few extra things other than the camera itself. First, you've got a little template you can use for marking your screw holes for your mount location. And then, of course, the screws that you can use to mount the camera. They also include some drywall anchors in case you're mounting into drywall. They also include this little thing here, which is a waterproofing connector for the Ethernet cable. And if you need to use this, consult the manual, but the basic idea is that you'll put the Ethernet cable through this first, and then this winds up getting screwed on like that with a little gasket in there to keep any water from getting in. Again, if you need to use these, check the owner's manual for exactly how to do it. In my particular case, my mounting locations are all set up so I don't need to use those, so I'm not going to use those on my install. There's a couple things to point out about the cameras themselves. First off, the turret and the body of the camera are both made of metal, which is a nice touch because that will hold up better against the elements than ones that are made of plastic. Secondly, there is a little trim ring here that just rotates off. Now, the trim ring is plastic, but that's not really all that consequential. It is just cosmetic after all. But the mounting holes here for the screws are going to be hidden really well by this little trim ring. So you pop the trim ring off, mount your camera with the screws, and then pop the trim ring back on, and it just rotates in to make for a nice clean looking installation. Finally, the wiring that is coming out of the back of the camera, you may notice that there are 2 different connectors. Well, the first, of course, is for the Ethernet cable, and the second is an optional power cable in case you don't have power over Ethernet available for some reason. If you just have a regular old Ethernet cable that doesn't have power, you can inject power using this secondary connector. Now, they come with a little plug that I have gone ahead and closed up because I'm not going to be using that, but if you need it, it's nice that it's there. Now, as I mentioned, I've already got security cameras installed from a different company, so I'm going to need to pull these down before I can put in the new ones. Of course, in your situation, if you don't already have cameras up, then you will need to run Ethernet cables to each of your install locations. But luckily, I've already got that done. When you're ready to install a camera and have Ethernet run to your install location, the first step is just to plug in the Ethernet cable. One of the features I like about these cameras is that on the connector, it has a little power indicator to let you know that the camera is getting power and connecting to your network. Once that is lit up, you can go ahead and tuck the wiring up into the ceiling or the wall, whatever you're installing next to, and then get ready to mount the camera. Now, these cameras do come with a template that you can use to mark your locations and drill pilot holes, but I found that's really not necessary. If you have a screw gun like this, the screws that they have are self-tapping, and you can use the holes that are in the mount plate itself as your guide just to go ahead and put the screws straight in. Now, there is one thing that I've noticed that's a little bit odd. I've connected this camera to the NVR, and it is already talking to the NVR and recording, but it's not showing up on the mobile app yet. And what I've discovered is when you connect a new camera, you have to go into the settings of the mobile app, click on Devices, click on the device that you have already connected, and then click Start Live View. Even though you were already on Live View, when you do that, the new camera will show up, and then you can, while you're watching in the camera, you can use it to aim to get exactly the view that you want. Now, these are nice wide cameras. These are wider than my old ones. I'll be able to see more of my front porch. Sweet. It's been several weeks since I finished installing all of these cameras, and I've had time to get used to the entire system, to learn about all of its features, to figure out what works really, really well and what could still be improved. Let's go over some of those things now. I want to start with the price point of this system. At the time that I'm recording this, it's around $800 or so US, though if you check the links in the description, sometimes they do go on sale, and I'll try and keep on top of that for you. Now, why is $800 a pretty good deal for this? Well, the system that I took down in order to install this one, I paid more for, and this new Onwote system has better performance in a number of different ways that I'll get into in just a few minutes. But not only that, I took a walk down the aisle for security cameras at my local big box store, and I could not believe how expensive they are. A single camera running in excess of $200, and this system comes with 8 of them. You'd be $1,600 or $1,800 in just for the cameras if you were to buy them at your local big box store. And then on top of that, they want you to pay extra charges for things like a cloud account so you can see the cameras remotely, or storage fees to keep your footage on file for a number of weeks or months, and retrieval fees if you ever want to get your footage. None of that exists with this system. You buy it once and you own everything. Now, to be fair, there was one extra account I had to set up in order to get remote access to these cameras, but it's completely free, and it's just an email address and a password, and then you're all set, and there's nothing extra to pay for. One of the features I really appreciate about this system is just how responsive the alerts are. You can see I'm walking out on my porch now. I've got my phone in my hand because I want to show you just how quickly it comes up. I've already got a notification that a human body has been detected on this camera. If you tap on the notification on your phone, then just pull down to refresh the notifications list. I can see a couple of human body detections because every time it detects a human body, it will mark it in the camera. Though it doesn't send you an alert for every one of them, it only sends you an alert, I think, on the first one, and then it waits a couple of minutes before it sends you another alert. But once you're in looking at the alert screen, you can just tap on the little film strip there to see the alert. It immediately connects to the camera's NVR and plays that alert to you right on your phone. So within just a couple of seconds of somebody coming up to my front door, I can pull my phone out of my pocket and see who it is. I also like just how easy the cameras are to set up. Once you have Ethernet cable run to your location, all it is just hold the camera up and put in 3 screws, aim the camera, and you're done. Really simple. Next up, let's talk about image quality and what sort of performance you can expect from these cameras. And I want to start by comparing it with my old system. The Onwote cameras offer a very wide field of view, which is substantially wider than my old cameras. Here's an example image from the old system, and here it is with the Onwote system. I'll flip back and forth between the two, and it should be obvious just how much better the new cameras are. The 4K resolution provides images that are sharp with excellent detail. There are lots of options in the software for adjusting the image to your liking. You can add brightness, change the dynamic range, etc. Also, the real-time monitoring is rock solid. With my old system, about half the time I'd try to open up their app either on my phone or on my computer, either at home or away, it didn't matter. About half the time it would just flat out refuse to connect. So far I've never had any problem connecting to this system, either from home or when I'm out of the house on a different network. It always just works, no matter whether I'm connecting from my phone, from a Mac, or from a Windows-based computer. As you saw at the beginning, adding the extra hard drive was extremely simple, and the new drive was immediately recognized by the system. One other feature I really like about this Onwote system is that they allow direct access to the cameras themselves rather than just to the NVR. My old system firewalled everything behind the NVR. I could never log into the cameras directly. But with this system, I can, which is really nice because the cameras run their own operating system. And if you're a tinkerer like I am, you can get in there and make all kinds of little changes and refine things to be exactly the way that you want them set up. You don't have to by any means, but it's really nice that it's available for those who want to. The night vision performance of these cameras is quite good, with the built-in IR lights being able to light up my entire backyard well enough to detect and report movement, as well as to recognize human shapes. And finally, I'd like to mention their technical support. There were a couple of questions I had and one issue I couldn't figure out how to take care of myself, and I was both able to email and get on the phone with an actual human being who had the answers I needed. It's really nice to see a company that stands behind their products with knowledgeable people that you can actually get a hold of and talk to, and they were quick and efficient and got me the answers that I needed. Now that pretty well sums up the things I really like about this system, and before I get into the things that could be improved, let me go over what I'm going to refer to as just neutral stuff. These are things you ought to know but don't necessarily fall into a good or a bad category, they just sort of are. Let's start with the user manual. Frankly, it's a bit sparse, which I completely understand because it would be really difficult to come up with a comprehensive user manual that covers everything that all of the cameras, the NVR, the third-party software can do. Creating a user manual to try and cover everything would be out of date just as soon as it was printed. However, some of the various systems themselves are also not very intuitive to learn and use. I'd like to point out that the built-in Onwote system that you can access with your computer's web browser that's on the NVR is the easiest to figure out, but it's also quite limited in that it only fully works with Internet Explorer, and any modern version of Windows doesn't have that, and it's not available at all on any Mac. The desktop software works well on both Windows and Mac, but it does lack some of the fine-grained control that you can access both in the web app on the NVR or by logging into the cameras themselves, as I mentioned earlier. Also, on the cameras that come with this system, there are no SD card slots where you can put a card into the camera to store your footage on the camera itself. All the footage is sent straight to the NVR and stored there. Not a big deal to me, but it's something that you probably ought to know. And the last thing I'd like to just briefly cover on my sort of neutral list is a word about network security. Camera systems like this one, not necessarily this specific one, but in general, security camera systems have we'll call it a not great track record for network security. Some other big name brands have had problems where footage has gotten lost or has become accessible to somebody who really shouldn't have had access to that footage. But security cameras aren't the only devices like this where this is a bit of a concern. More and more things in your home are getting just connected to your network. Your garage door opener, your coffee maker, your thermostat, all of these things, a lot of them anyway, if you buy brand new ones, they've got some smart option where they want to get connected to your network, which generally is a good thing. It can provide extra functionality, but there's other things on your network that I personally don't want to get exposed to anything that could potentially allow for a breach. Things like my computer, where I keep, passwords and banking information, that sort of thing. So I strongly recommend that before you plug in anything like this to your home network, that you set up a separate dedicated network for Internet of Things devices like security cameras, thermostats, that sort of thing. Now, doing that is beyond the scope of this video, but I will leave some links down in the description where you can learn more about this and how to set it up on your own home network. And finally, let me talk a little bit about an area where there's some opportunity for improvement, which is a polite way of saying I don't like this part very much, and that is the ecosystem. Now, what do I mean by an ecosystem? Well, you've got the cameras themselves, and then they run their own operating system, and they have their own settings and configurations and changes you can make on each camera. Then each camera is plugged into the NVR, and the NVR runs its own operating system and has a whole bunch of changes and configuration for the NVR, but also in that system you can make changes to the cameras, except a lot of those changes don't work properly with the cameras. For instance, I went into the NVR and tried to change the image quality of the camera, change the bit rate or change the encoding values for the audio streams, those sorts of fairly deep technical stuff. And the NVR, I could make the change and hit save, and then it would just flip back because the camera was rejecting the change coming from the NVR. Now, to be fair, you can make all of those changes. You just have to log into the camera itself because the way the NVR does it, it doesn't work. And then you add the third layer, which is the desktop software, or even the fourth layer, which is the mobile software, where you can make even more changes and configurations specific to those things, but can also affect the way the NVR is configured. So if you want to make changes and tinker with things and really dive deep, it's pretty difficult to figure out which layer do I have to log into in order to make the change that I'm trying to make. And once you get logged into the right layer, sometimes it doesn't work because you're using the wrong browser or you're on the wrong operating system. A lot of these changes, I think I mentioned this earlier, can only be done if you're running Windows and only if you have Internet Explorer. Well, it's 2024. Internet Explorer has been discontinued for years, and you can't even actually install it on Windows anymore. You can enable Internet Explorer mode, which is what I had to do using the Edge browser, and then suddenly a lot of these extra features were available. But this whole ecosystem is a little bit of a mess. It's something of an afterthought, if you ask me. And if, like me, you're a tinkerer who really likes to get in and fiddle with all the different settings and knobs and dials and switches, you might find this pretty frustrating, as I did. Now, To be fair, all I really had to do was get in touch with their tech support, who had all of the answers that I needed, but it was frustrating for a few days there to not be able to do what I wanted to do, which some of these things were very, very easy with my prior system. And once I learned how Onwote likes these things set up, they are obviously all doable and relatively easy. You just have to know which layer in the ecosystem do you go to change this thing versus that thing versus this other thing. It's a little bit of a mess. And finally, I've got to talk about the audio quality of these cameras. Frankly, it's atrocious. I'm standing on my porch, maybe 10 feet away from this camera, speaking in a very projected way. I'm talking a lot louder than I would with somebody who was just having a conversation with me at my door, and I hope you can understand any of this. The audio quality on these cameras is, well, tell me what you think it sounds like down in the comments below. All right, so how do I sum up my experience with the Onwote system? Well, it's an excellent value and it's very easy to set up. It offers really, really good image quality, and I was pretty happy with the technical support that I received when I needed a little bit of help. All in all, I really like this system. If you've got more questions or comments about it, you can leave those down in the comment section below. I read all of them and I will try and get back to you as quickly as I can. If you'd like to see more videos like this, you can think about subscribing, but there's never any pressure from me on that, of course. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Messing with settings inside the house and then coming back up here and climbing back up the ladder, ow, and hitting my head in the ceiling, ow. Camera up and then just pop the trim ring back on. And once you line it up, it just locks on with a little quarter turn. If I can ever find out how to do this, this is take number 27, and I still can't get the stupid trim ring on. Of course. Yep, okay, if you look up, here's a camera. You got your hands, I'm gonna drop it in 3, 2, 1. Good catch.